On the latest episode of the PCT podcast, we catch up with assistant lead YDP coach Lee Garlick, a UEFA A licence and FA Advanced Youth Award coach. Lee speaks to us around the importance of volunteering, the power a mentor can have, and developing people and players. Don't forget to follow us on our social media platforms and subscribe to keep up to date with our content. Hi, good evening, Lee. How are you, mate?
Yeah, very well, thanks, mate. Great to see you.
Yeah, it's good to finally get caught up after the madness we're going through. Again, thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. During this, obviously, madness, how are you keeping yourself busy?
Yeah, it's amazing, really, isn't it, that the things you can find to pass the time with. Found myself doing a few more jobs around the house, but there's always something that I can be doing instead. So what I'm quite fortunate in the club I'm at now. We're still working, so we're still trying to keep in touch with the boys and one another. So there's things going on daily that we can get our football fix. But apart from that, it's great to spend time with my wife. That's something that working football you don't get a lot of, I guess, time at home. So I can't argue with that at the minute. And then other things like catching up on TV series, doing a bit of reading. I don't usually get a chance to read during the season. It's hard. It is difficult, but like with things like this, still get to speak to friends and we find new ways, don't we? So it's challenging, but I think we're getting there, aren't we?
We're getting through. We're certainly adapting well. And I'm sure that a few of our listeners will be aware of maybe your voice. So can you just tell us a little bit about what you do at the minute and, your sort of roles that you're up to?
Yeah, current role, my full-time role is assistant lead youth development phase, which is a fancy term for overseeing the 12 to 14s programme in the academy at West Bromwich Albion. I've been there since last June, so approaching a year already. Not the way I thought the end of the year would finish, but been at West Bromwich Albion 12 to 14s. That's my lead full-time role. I also, like how we met one another, do the FA mentoring. That's a role that I continue on top of my full-time role. So they're my sort of my jobs, I guess. And like yourself, have a podcast, just an excuse to chat to people and talk football. Just not that we ever need an excuse, is it?
No, and obviously quite happy to get a little plug. So where can we listen to your podcast?
Yeah, so the podcast is called The Coach's Coffee Club, which it's a strange sort of. This doesn't sound like your every sort of football podcast, but the idea of it came from going on courses such as like the mentoring events and A license stuff where we've met and on different courses, and then you just get chatting to people. And as much as the content of the course was really valuable, I found that the informal stuff, the chats in the bar, the stuff over lunch was really what also sparked thought and conversations around personal development. So the informal stuff really intrigued me. Started to do some events in my previous role at Northampton, and hosted some stuff independently, and then decided to take that sort of informal learning concept of having a coffee, or I don't even drink hot drinks, mate, so I don't know why I went down that route, but it's just sort of that, like you and I just spent half an hour chatting before we even recorded. That's that informal. I think it's something that I think is really, really important for development of coaches. So trying to basically take that idea. The podcast is just a recorded version of that kind of concept, really. So yeah, the thought behind it was the informal learning, I suppose, and how important I found that in my development. And then it was just the opportunity to just pick the brains of people for myself personally and share that in the process, I guess.
I'm surprised you've not rebranded as the Coaches Corona Club.
I think I might have a lawsuit on the hands there, and
it certainly get a lot of attention on Twitter and trending.
Yeah, you might maybe a hashtag come in there. I could get a bit more attention.
No, I mean the reason, obviously, I wanted to have a chat today, we met on the mentoring course, or the mentoring days as such, and we've been in touch for a few years now. Just wanted to go through, before we spoke about that, sort of your career to date and how you got to become a mentor, really, and what age you started coaching.
Yeah, so like most of us in coaching, I suppose, I was a failed footballer. I knew from a fairly young age I wasn't gonna make it as a player, I suppose, but I didn't want to give up that dream, and I sort of my dad actually coached my local team, and without knowing it, I just found a sort of, I guess, an interest in doing that, not through anything that I disliked about coaches or teaching. I just found a real interest for the theory behind teaching and learning, and from sort of college, went to college, did a BTEC in sport, still playing football at that time as well, and then went on to university, did a degree as well. Those were kind of calculated steps in if I wanted to go into not necessarily full-time in football, but full-time employment in sport. That's what I would need. Whilst doing that, part-time voluntary stuff. I actually applied for work experience with Northampton Town when I was 16 and got rejected. So I didn't get that. So I was like, gutted. The first job I applied for, voluntary. And so I ended up going to a gym for my work experience. But actually, the gentleman from the football club offered me some volunteering hours on a Saturday. And then just from there, it built up, doing my qualifications, level 1 and 2 at college. That became paid work, going into the schools as a part-time sort of 0-hour contract coach in the community scheme. And just gradually built up from there, doing some volunteering in the academy. Obviously, went away to university, did some work whilst I was at uni, did some work for Man United Soccer Schools, which was a massive franchise that was all across the country and Ireland, and doing some work there with coaches there in the soccer school. So it was still a sort of a mixed ability, but that opened my eyes and started to get me thinking about the opportunities in football. Came back after university to Northampton, and again picking up more and more hours, just going into schools and sort of created nearly full-time hours as a community coach. A massive learning experience for me, and something that I think has been invaluable to my career. I had a conversation with some friends recently around the importance of sort of cutting your teeth in a class of, could be 10 kids, could be 37 kids in a small hall because it's raining, and just all of the things that you don't get taught on a course. That's where you really learn it. So that was where I found that after university, I did a year in about, I say a year, it was a sort of 6-7 month contract in America, coaching. That was a company called UK Elite Soccer. So that was spring and autumn team coaching. That was probably my first real eye-opener to working with teams, especially at sort of 13, 14, 16. And then in the summer was like the camps, the summer camps, which was a lot of fun, but again, challenging in its own way. And came back from there.
How old were you?
I was 21, old enough to drink. So it was.
It's one way of remembering.
yeah. I was 21. Massive life experience, let alone a coaching experience, but loads of different levels of players, different clubs. Clubs were huge. The grassroots level out there, the clubs were massive. So that was really interesting. But what I found with that is the visas were short term, and it was return to England. A lot of the people who were there who'd gone out several years, it was return to England, do a job to get past the time, and then go back out the next year for 7 or 8 months, and then keep that cycle going for a while. And whilst it was fun, I didn't want to be. I wanted to challenge myself and work in the game in England, and that's when I got the football development officer job full time in the community scheme at Northampton. So again, the degree helped me, and I had my B licence by then. That became my full-time role, which I did for 3 or 4 years. Went off to Australia with my now wife, because the job became, I really enjoyed the job. It was a challenge, but it became more office-based. So we went to Australia. I bought a one-way ticket, actually. But we were going to go travelling and all sorts. And whilst I was out there, thought, oh, I need some money. How am I going to do this? All I know is coaching. And found a gentleman, English guy out there, to set up a company called Kickaroos, of all things. Right. And it was coaching in Sydney. And I emailed him, had an interview, and managed to pick up a lot of hours out there coaching, from real little ones, 3-4-year-olds, to clubs of 17, 18. Just before I flew out, literally a week or so before, the academy manager at Northampton said, oh, there's this thing called the EPPP that's coming in. And there's some regulations around the roles we need. And myself and another lad, Mark, we were offered the foundation and lead youth development phase roles. And I was like, oh, I've got a one-way ticket to Australia. My now wife was already out there. Yeah. So what do I do? It's this opportunity to go in football full time, but I've got a one-way ticket to it. Anyway, long story short, he said, well, let's negotiate. What if you come back and start in September, for example? So I went out. We had about 6-7 months, and then we both came back. And so I was left just in the right place at the right time, I think, with the introduction of the EPPP for my first full-time role. That progressed, head of coaching at a later date. And then, like I said, last year, moving to West Brom for back into a coaching role. So that's a long-winded answer. I apologise.
No, it's fine. There's some real great bits to come out of that. I mean, certainly the first bit there, when I think it's quite ironic. You had quite a successful spell at Northampton, having been rejected at such a young age for work experience. But you mentioned there that obviously you went in as a volunteer on a match day and other bits. Just for anybody out there who is getting frustrated at the lack of opportunities, for example, what would you say the value of volunteering your time is?
Oh, it's massive. It's massive. Not only for building your reputation, but just for learning the skills and qualities needed. Mm-hmm. I was very fortunate, although I didn't probably understand or appreciate it at the time. The coaches I was in and around and observing and watching the way they worked and the sort of the things that they instilled upon me were massive. And again, at the time I was 16, 17, so I didn't really know, just thought that's how it was done. Only now am I looking back and going, actually, that the qualities that I'd like to think I picked up or stole from that person were really good. So yeah, and then just by being able to show your enthusiasm, your reliability, your commitment, those kind of things. It's not about being the best at the start, but it's about being reliable, enthusiastic, and committed. People are then gonna trust you more and give you more opportunities. And I think that was massive. And even still, when I was full time as the football development officer, I was volunteering in the academy. So I was working in the community. I was full-time paid member of staff, but I was still going to. First opportunity in the academy was a voluntary one. I was assisting or helping around the 15, 16s, and again, looking back now, learnt some really valuable lessons. Yeah. And then maybe in hindsight, that during that time, that's what were the building blocks I put in place that later, 2-3 years later, the academy manager said, there's a full-time come up, would you be interested? Now, yeah, there's a bit of luck involved. I had the qualifications, I was at the right place, right time, but I'd built my reputation, or he knew me from the work I'd been doing, albeit voluntarily, and I kind of got my reward a year or two later.
I was going to say, you say there that you might have had a little bit of luck, but I think listening to that there, you've certainly made your own luck by those building blocks. And certainly, as I say, with that volunteering, just another thing I wanted to sort of touch on was your experiences really before you went into the full-time role in football. And again, I've mentioned this with other coaches, it's classed as the pinnacle of a coach's career really, to get in an academy system full-time. What would you say the value was as the community coach, and also again, a bit of a long-winded question as such.
No, it's
How
cool.
valuable were the experiences abroad?
Okay, so the football development officer, that being the role there entailed approaching, speaking to schools and trying to get business from the schools in terms of them buying into what we could offer in terms of PPA cover, after school, lunch time, all that. So there was an element of my communication skills were worked on then. The biggest thing, the two main things I took from that role were responsibility. So now I was kind of responsible for bringing in money or not, adding business or not, because the Football in the Community programme was a not-for-profit organisation, but so you need to generate enough money to be self-sustainable and keep. So I had to deal with budgets, and then of course there'd be a team of staff. So I was fortunate; I had 5 or 6 part-time coaches who were really, really good, really reliable. But naturally, things crop up, so then I had to problem solve. I've got a school on the phone, and the coach hasn't turned up because he's got a flat tire or whatever. And so it's problem solving, it's managing staff, it's having the responsibility that actually the buck stops with me here. And that really helped. And then going abroad, it was only short time periods, and I didn't work in the professional game abroad, but it made me value the game in this country, even at the grassroots level. And that's not meant disrespectfully to America or Australia, but football or soccer wasn't their number one sport. So there was lots of, they were a little bit behind where we were, which was, listen, I was out there, I was working with kids and it was great fun. I met some brilliant people out there and still work with some excellent players. But the game in England, what England has and the whole country and the match day experience, the way, don't get me wrong, the Americans, the resources and the dedication and all that stuff was out of this world. But it just wasn't English football, and the sort of the pro game back here was always a goal for me to get in at somehow. So that kind of, it was a great, like all the softer skills around communication and resilience, because it wasn't easy at times having to try and find work when you're renting an accommodation in Sydney. All that kind of stuff was massively important to me developing. But there's some great people out there, and just little things like language, using the language. I remember saying to one player in America he said, "Coach, can we tackle?" And I said, "Well, yeah, of course you can tackle. It's opposed practice." And he's literally ran and what we'd call snotted this kid rugby tackle. And I was like, "Whoa, what's that?" He was like, "You said we could tackle, coach." And I was like, yeah, like football, like soccer, tackle. He said, "Oh, you mean steal the ball?" And I'm thinking, oh wow, tackle is like bang, proper tackle in America, whereas in England the tackle is just win it with your feet. And I thought, actually, that's fascinating, because he's just done what I've told him to do, but his interpretation was very different. So that made me start to think about what I say and how it's perceived, which was, look, the kid was all right. Just want to let everyone know that the kid was fine. But,
that's good.
Yeah, but it was fascinating for little things like that. And actually, there's like the words I use are different, but just that was an eye opener. Like, oh, interpretation. That's really important now. And so I started thinking about that.
I mean, that's something I've just jotted down, and I want to come on to when it comes to the mentoring, if that's okay, because I think that's a valuable part of helping a coach is understanding what he says and how he says it. But just going back to the valuable experience that you built there through volunteering in the community abroad, you got to the role of head of coaching. Just tell us a little bit about, obviously, I know you've told us the journey, but was there any frustrations along the way where possibly you'd gone for a job and been, I'm not going to say rejected, but turned down, and how you had to rebuild yourself?
Yeah, so it was an interesting one, actually, how I've got the head of coaching role. So again, EBBB, so Northampton was at the time a Category 3 academy, which means with the new EBBB coming in, there's different, or when it came in at the time, there was different requirements to operate at certain levels. And at the category 3, it was, when we started, it was probably 5 or 6 full-time staff. As the EPPP started to progress, then there was more full-time staff coming in, and head of coaching, which was a bespoke position for the club in terms of developing the staff. That's not something that Northampton had, or any Cat 3 club had as per the rules. They might have had people operating in roles, but it was never an essential requirement. So then that came out, and actually I had applied for the under-18s role at the club at the time. So I was lead YD phase. I was taking the 16s, running the 12 to 16s. Craig Hinton moved to his role at the FA, and I applied for the 18s role. So the head of coaching was never really on my radar. And then academy manager at the time had a conversation, said, "Look, I think you'd be really good at this. What do you think?" And I thought, actually, yeah, I quite like I said, I like the theory behind coaching, and I'd been at the club a while, and Mark Lyons and I had wrote or helped write a lot of the programme, and I thought that could be a good challenge for me. I was starting to feel starting to get a little bit stale. I needed that next challenge. I'd been in the same role for a long time, and I'd done I was fortunate to do my qualifications there, and I needed that next bit. So the head of coaching was sort of put to me. It was never on the plan, and I thought, actually, yeah, I'll give that a try. What a good opportunity, chance to try and shape the way the coaches work and the programme. And so I gave it a shot. And yeah, so part of me was a bit disappointed that I wasn't getting the coaching role with the 18s, but that was short-lived because it was this new challenge. And I sort of had that again, it came with a personal development programme through the Premier League on the EHOC program. So there was I was, not to say I wanted to always be on a course, but I always wanted something to be making me think or trying to develop a little bit. And with that, it was a 3 or 4 year personal development course. So again, that really caught my attention and was quite attractive. So I went with that.
The EHOC course then, obviously, for those that aren't aware, it's the Elite Head of Coaching programme, as you mentioned, put on by the Premier League. What does that sort of entail then, and how does that support your journey as a head of coaching?
Yeah, so I was in the second cohort, so it was very, very new, and the programme was still in its infancy. But in a nutshell, I guess it's to develop you, to enable you to further develop your staff, and they did that in so many ways. To be fair to the Premier League, it was really forward thinking. We won the first. We're up in the Lake District, and I'm abseiling and I'm gorge walking, and they're taking you out your comfort zone, and then they'll have guest speakers, and then there'll be you'll go and do mentoring qualifications, and then there'll be sometimes you're off doing in the Brecon Beacons doing a leadership army style course, whereby I remember I was a second in command on an ambush, and so I had to, and then we had to rank each other on how the leader was, how the second in command acted, and just like weird and wonderful ways to take you out your comfort zone, but try and relate it then back to your role. So it was very bespoke. Just before I left, they were in the process of having mentors for ourselves, a professional skills mentor and a sports mentor. So it wasn't purely football based, but it was about supporting, mentoring, educating, guiding others, as well as developing yourself to be able to do that, which was really interesting. I say, met some really good people, and definitely took me out of my comfort zone.
So you mentioned there you enjoyed the theory side, you enjoyed developing others. Couldn't roll at West Brom. Why the change? Why back to the grass?
Yeah, so the head of coaching role, it's a funded position by the Premier League, and obviously there was some rules or regulations around it, and with that role, you can't specifically take a team. So I guess it's to prevent clubs hiring a head of coaching and just putting them in as an age group coach. Their role, and I agree with it, because my role is to develop or help support the coaches if my attention has to be on them. And so I didn't have a team. It just got to a point where I really missed working with players. I was still working with players, and it was great, but working with players regularly over a longer time period. There's only so much I can do when I'm dipping in and out or doing a session here or a session there. Now, it was excellent. I got to work with the 9s through to the 18s, and I could go out and support or deliver sessions whenever I want. But what I was missing was day one of the season through to the final day of the season, seeing and supporting those players on that journey, and the buzz or the excitement or the challenge of planning a session and almost, I did a lot of talking about it in my role as head of coaching, and I was not doing it myself, and I just really missed that. And so the opportunity to work at a club like West Brom with the staff at West Brom and the players of the quality as they are at West Brom, I thought that was definitely an opportunity that I couldn't turn down. So that's obviously they're Cat 1, so it's a much bigger organisation, and there's loads more staff, more experience, and I wanted to be challenged again as a coach. So that was really why I took that step.
Yeah, no, again, alongside sort of the role that you do as the mentor with the FA, a program that you've been in for 4 years. And you mentioned there you'd had some mentors along the way through the EHOC program. How powerful is it having a mentor during your coaching journey?
Yeah, it's massive. Really, really, I think everyone should have one. What I would say is that you don't necessarily have to call them your mentor, and they probably don't need to know that they are your mentor as well, if that makes sense. I know that nowadays it's maybe fashionable or commonplace to say I'm a mentor, or I'm speaking to my mentor. Now, that might just be a way of categorising it, but we've all probably had or have people who we look up to, who challenge us with difficult questions or who support us. That's enough to be classed as a mentor, in my opinion. Okay. They don't have to be labelled a mentor, or you don't have to label them your mentor. It might just be one of the words one of the phrases they use on our courses when we meet is critical friend.
Yeah.
And so so you and I class you as one of my mentors because you'd ask me questions that make me go, oh, hold on a minute. That's mentoring. Right. So I think you can find mentors anywhere. I think seeking the right mentor is important. But it's what they do, how you feel towards them. They're the really key things. So if you can label it as a mentor-mentee relationship, absolutely brilliant. No, I'm not saying don't do that. But also I think if someone hasn't got a mentor as such right now, they shouldn't worry, but they should just start to think who mentors me, maybe without knowing, or who do I look to as inspirational figure, or someone who will be that voice of reason on my shoulder. And I think everyone's got them. So having that is vital, I think. I think, yeah. So again, I'd stress that people don't need to worry as such if they don't have a designated mentor by that title. But the mentor-mentee relationship, or the process of what they do, is vital. And I think anyone who is serious about personal development, coaching, whether that's coaching, teaching, whatever, should look for those kind of people in their life.
Just looking back then, did you feel, or do you feel now, you had a dedicated mentor at a young age? Or was there
yeah, there's probably many different. I think that's where, and I guess, so I always say, and I don't know what your thoughts on this, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on, as a mentor, I feel like you can only help a mentee who wants to be helped, or who wants to develop, if that makes sense. And I think it's a two-way process. I remember speaking to Ryan May. Ryan May believes a mentee should choose their mentor, not the opposite way around. So like having the mentor forced upon you, that might not be the right fit. Yeah. Which is where if you as the coach, or so you go and seek that person, So when I look back, I think I've had loads. So like I said, the first gentleman I coached under, now at the time I didn't know. I have to stress, I was too young or inexperienced to realise that that person was forging some of my thoughts, feelings, or actions. So Russell Lewis, he's still working at Northampton Town in the community scheme. The way that he conducted and the way that he interacted with children was one of the best I've ever seen, still to this day. So without knowing, he would shape me. Same as Trevor Gould, my academy manager at Northampton, gave me the first opportunity. A lot of things that when I look back on, I go, oh, actually that and that were really, really good, and I like that about him. So hopefully I've took some of those. But I think they were my line managers at the time, but they were both more experienced than me, had a lot more years of working under their belt, and took the time to help me when maybe I had so much going on that I didn't really realise. So they formed some of my sort of ways of thinking early on, and then as you go through it, like you come across people, don't you, who inspire you or who challenge you. Like that's the good thing about it, is when you sat down and people will go, no, I don't know if you're right there. They're the people that you want in your circle, aren't you? Because as long as their intentions are good, someone who just makes you think or question it, you go, actually, yeah, maybe. Or they just drop something in there and go, have you thought about this? And then you go, now I'm going to have to start again. Or so yeah, different people at different times will come and go and add different things. But again, maybe now that I'm aware of the mentoring process stuff, I'd be more aware now of who those people are. But I say, on reflection, I'd say there's some people early in my journey that probably did mentor me without me knowing. Maybe they didn't know themselves; they were just doing their job. But me being younger and less experienced, I looked up to them and took, just like all good coaches, I just stole the best bits off them, I think.
Well, as the saying goes, the greatest of coaches are also the greatest of thieves.
Yeah.
You mentioned there, obviously, your discussion about a mentee needs to choose their mentor. I mean, just to add some sort of argument back to that, I can remember my first year in the mentor program, being asked to go into a club to help their club DNA. And I went in all guns blazing about my opinions and my views, and probably annoyed a lot of people, if I'm brutally honest. But the people that the club identified were the ones that the club wanted to get better. They didn't want to. And in a full circle sort of turn as such, I ended up working with people who came to me. And that was pleasing, that they wanted to get better. And I think context, if you're going to be a mentor as such, they're the people that you cling on to and, really curb that enthusiasm. Would you agree?
Yeah. So again, I was the first year of mentoring through the FA. That the reason I took that role was to give me extra practice of coaching coaches for my head of coaching role. I took them at the same time. Some of the first clubs I had, Morsley FC in Northamptonshire, they were excellent. They welcomed me with open arms, and their coaches were so willing to, not Morsley and Brixworth, to be fair, they were both excellent at wanting help and wanting stuff, and yeah, they were, as a new mentor, I was really fortunate to get those two clubs, because all of the staff were really engaging. They wanted to get better for the right reasons. It was to help the kids. It wasn't to get a qualification or to get to the next level. It was to make the environment better for their kids. And it wasn't like a mentor-mentee relationship. We just became friends, and I still speak to a lot of the guys now. And it was really easy, because, like you said, they drove it. Mm-hmm. They drove it, and a lot of the time, listen, I still to this day, I think I've learned more from the coaches I mentor than I think they've learnt from me, because there's so much good work going on in the grassroots game. The softer skill, like I say, the way that they deal with children. A lot of them are parents, teachers, or just really enthusiastic people who enjoy working with children, and the way that they engage and work is fascinating. But those two clubs I started, and to be fair, the most successful mentor-mentee relationships I've had have been driven by the mentee, not necessarily by me. And I still think that's vital in longevity and the sort of what do they call it, legacy of the mentoring program. So we're only allowed to work with a club for a year. We can go and visit again in legacy hours, but when you touch base with these people who are now your friends, you see that they've gone beyond where you took them. They continue to improve their self, and it wouldn't have worked without their buy-in, really. So that's massive, I think.
I mean, one of the things that I've sort of picked up from that was, does mentoring have to be a direct relationship, or can mentoring be, as you mentioned there, a person's behaviours and have a direct influence on their spirituality as such?
Yeah, I think one of the things I found that obviously we had or still have set hours that we can work within a club or with a coach, and it's not possible to work with every coach in a big grassroots club. So a lot of the work would happen like the ripple effect. So I'd work closely with the nines coach because he's coming to me, he's asking for more, and okay, the nines and the 11s coaches, they're going to get a bit of my time because it's going to be best spent. But then when I'm not at the club, that nines and 11s coach, they continue doing the work that you've sort of introduced them to, or you've asked them some questions and they've gone away and they've dug deeper and they've tried to change. And then the 12s coach looks over and he sees what's going on, and then you got the 8s coach seeing a bit. So they might, what have you done there, Martin? Oh, just trying this thing where we start the practice with a game because the kids weren't turning up on time, and now they're all, I might try that next week. Yeah, it's really worked for me because now the kids are all here with 5 minutes before the session because they know we're going to start with a game. And that's mentoring, but like second level. It's just you've fostered that. The coaches are now teaching and helping each other, and so we've had a wider effect. We've worked with 2, but now there's 4 who are buying in because they want to be, and that's, I think that's massive. Yeah, massive. And again, the ideas that I'm presenting are ideas I've seen or took from somewhere else, but I think slowly trying to change or influence or help adapt a culture or a way of doing things in a club, once you get 1 or 2 on board and it starts having success, the others will jump on and see the value in it. Because naturally, we're humans. We're scared of change. We're scared of difference. We're scared of being judged. Mm-hmm. So to put your hand up and go, I want someone to come and watch my sessions and tell me where I'm going wrong, it takes quite a special individual to do that, because we don't like being criticised. Now, the mentoring scheme is not to criticise, but it's not easy to deliver a session with someone watching, especially when they turn up with the FA badge on. It's really difficult. So that's how I had some of my most successful work. I'd say I only did the very first bits. The coaches themselves did the rest.
You mentioned there turning up with the FA badge to your mentor meetings. I remember a story from one of our mentor days where one of the mentors turned up at the club meeting in the bar. I think it was probably about a week after England lost to Iceland, and he got hammered as to why the FA are doing this and that, and that was certainly a learning moment for him not to turn up.
Yeah. Well, that was something that I learned massively from through the FA, that the mentoring doesn't have to be on or near the pitch. So I've like we're doing now, and it was, like I said earlier, the premise of the coffee club. I'd meet the coaches and we'd go for a drink and we'd just chat about things, and we'd have some paper and we'd be scribbling and sharing ideas, and actually that's where we had some really valuable interaction, rather than it being, because everyone feels a bit more comfortable in that scenario. And I think building that connection and that relationship in the mentoring process is massive as a mentor. It's about breaking down of those barriers or those concepts. So I'm not here to watch your session and rip it apart. Let's just go and have a chat about. Sometimes I'm just going to watch you and I'm going to pat you on the back and say, do you know what? That's bloody brilliant. Keep doing that. because it's not often that a grassroots coach might get told that, because a lot of them work on their own in isolation. But just having that chat somewhere different, it's level playing field now. We're just in the bar having a chat. I'm not even wearing my kit. I'm just Lee and you're Martin, and we're having a chat.
I think that's been one of the biggest things for me is building that rapport and understanding, I'm not going to say the mentee, but the person behind the coach and why they're doing it. I think you'll agree that in the grassroots game, 8 maybe out of 10 coaches are born out of a need for a coach, and they'll do it to have their son or daughter's team going. So to build that rapport and understand why they're doing it will certainly help, maybe influence them longer term, I think, and spark that passion. One of the biggest sort of requests I had, or conversations I'd say over the last couple of years, is, can you come down and help me? I don't know what I'm doing. And I would disagree with that massively, because they do know what they're doing. They just maybe, as you say, need that pat on the back and that reassurance. What would you say have been the main requests you've had as a mentor?
Yeah, so a lot of it was, so the two areas I'd say for me were around, and it differs with the coach's journey. So I was fortunate that, like I say, in some of the earlier clubs, there's a few guys going through or towards B license. So it was around some of the course content and stuff there, and how they could still work on the areas they want to work on, given the restrictions they have of space and numbers and things like that. So practice design was, and effective use of time was really quite a big thing. Had a lot of work or requests around sort of match day, not necessarily tactical work, but just managing the match day scenario and ensuring that coaching still happens on a match day. Because as an inexperienced parent doing it for the first time, taking a group of 7, 8, 9-year-old children to one central venue where there's hundreds, maybe thousands of bodies, 10, 15 games going on, it's a really daunting environment for a child and a coach. So just, I want the kids to learn, how do I ensure this still on a match day? Because I hear the messages of, it's not all about winning, we do positivity and all that is great, but what does that actually look like on a match day? How do I ensure that and keep sure that these kids are having fun, still being challenged and developed, but managing logistics? And that was one of the things that we spoke about on a fairly regular basis, I think.
Yeah, helping the coach, or the volunteer understand what that looks like and identifying it maybe. And you provided me with a great quote a year or so ago that has certainly had a big impact on my work as a mentor, of being a mentor is like being a driving instructor. You can sit on the journey with them, but you can't take the test. And I think that's been quite powerful for me personally as a mentor. How would you say you've changed as a mentor from when you first walked in at St. George's Park 4 years ago? Or in fact, it's Halifax Town, wasn't it, 4 years ago?
Yeah. Put on a bit of weight since then, I think, mate.
Get size, got big.
How have I changed? I think it's okay. I'm more comfortable now with saying to the guys that I don't have the answer, and that it's okay to get it wrong. I think I'm better now at understanding, or I've got more strings to my bow in a way to work with a coach. So I'm now, when I first went in, I had an idea of what the mentoring looked like and my role within it. But now through experience and failing, I've realised that some coaches need some ways of working, others need support in different ways. Sometimes it's actually absolutely fine to do it for them as an example.
Yeah.
Like I was worried, like, no, I can't lead a session for you. My job's not to take the session, it's to try and, but there's a time where maybe the best thing is, do you want me to show you? Honestly, they've asked for me, or tell you what, let me explain it. If you want, next week, I don't mind coming down and I'll take it from the paper to real life if you want. Now, I'm not saying you have to do it like this, or But this is an easier way of me explaining. And some coaches just would prefer that. And I've learned to realise that's okay. Whereas other coaches go, no, come on now. And again, it's building those relationships, isn't it? Saying to, I think of 2 coaches already where I can say, no, you're good enough to do that. Just believe in yourself. Go on, just give it a try. Yeah. And then, oh yeah, actually, I get that, yeah. Or you can sit, and once you build that relationship, sit on the shoulder and go, what have you seen there? Nah, stop, hold on. And they don't mind you jumping in and going, now what about this? Oh yeah, brilliant. Or and it's just, I'm now more comfortable with working in a few different ways depending on who I'm working with. Whereas at first, I just had my idea, and
that was that.
It's not one size fits all. It definitely isn't.
I mean, I have to agree with that. I found it very hard during the first 12 months, certainly, to differentiate between being a coach and a mentor. Would you say that there is a difference, and how would you go about being those 2 different hats? Because it's very easy for us to go, I'll go in there, but what I found is it's not our journey.
Yeah. This was a challenge that I faced when I became head of coaching as well. I'm no longer the coach. So I do think there's a difference. I think there's one huge similarity, and that's the roles of mentor and coach are still about developing people. And it sounds like a cliche, developer of people, but that's what you do. Our job, whether it's a coach or a mentor, is to put stepping stones or actions in place that support, encourage, aid someone to be better than they were. And that might just be with going, that's right, carry on. Or it might be a more in-depth process of taking them on a journey and changing their thought process and whatever. But it's just, I think there is a difference, but there's a lot of similarities at the same time. Whereas, like you said, I had to switch my mind from when I became a mentor, I had to put a middleman in as such. So it's, I've seen a problem or I've seen something I really like the player do or happen in the game. How can I get that message, or how can I highlight that message via someone else? Or how can I get someone else, how can I help someone else to see that? Or do you know what I mean? So rather than it be brilliant, one thing that I really worked on a lot with some coaches is communication. And rather, I hear a lot of praise. Brilliant, well done, excellent. And I think that's vital at the young ages. But I wanted them to be more specific with their praise so that player understands what it exactly is they're doing well. So it might be, Johnny, really loved the way you tried to receive on your left foot away from pressure, something like that. Yeah. Now there's some message. I could shout that on to Johnny, but I have to get Martin to recognise and start to understand why it's important that when he shouts on to Johnny, he might do that. So it was like adding another person in, but at the same time, making sure they're not just becoming a clone of me, which is why I said I took a lot from them. I'd come away from sessions and go, oh my God, I can't believe why have I never thought of that? Like, and then I'm going back to West Brom or Northampton as head of coaching, and then I'm implementing things. I'm like, lads, let's give this a try. Or the next time I'm coaching, I'm saying something I've heard the under-9s coach say, and actually it connected with the kids like that. Because that was a big weakness of mine, was foundation phase football. Not done it for many years and don't have much experience there. So I was very conscious that my way is not the only way. But you have to, like when I was head of coaching at Northampton, I have to improve the players, but I have to improve the players through the coaches.
The coaches, yeah.
Rather than me directly. I say in the long run that direct interaction is what I missed, which is why I'm back in the role I'm in now. But as a mentor, it's not just do what I do or let me do it for you. It's maybe talking to someone to understand. Yeah, it's, well, why do you stop at the red light? Or do you know what I mean? And I think it's hard because we're all passionate and we all want to see people do well. But if you look at it as developing people, right, as a mentor, you then get your fix from seeing the coach spot that thing or act in a certain way or show improvement. You go, yeah, that's the same fix I would get when I'm working directly with a player, because it's still people development.
I mean, there's one thing that you've taken there, and I just sort of want to give a shout out to anybody that I've helped mentor or helped influence, because some of the work that they've done has certainly influenced me as a coach. And I think if they understood and heard that power that they've had and passed on to what they might perceive as a more experienced or qualified coach, and it's not always the case, they've certainly added value to my coaching journey. And you touched on something there about language and understanding, and it's something I wanted to go back to, because you'll hear one of the classic cases in grassroots coaching is go and stand on the cone, and little Johnny, as you mentioned, will go and run up, 2-footed jump on the cone, flatten your cone, and you're like, Johnny, what are you doing? How important is terminology and getting coaches to understand that terminology within mentoring?
Yeah, it's massive. I think it's massive in even now in my role as a coach. I'm still trying to improve it. It's I think one thing we used to speak about, and I try and speak about with the coaches that I work with, is having the maximum impact with the minimum output from us, if that makes sense. So using as few words as possible, but describing something as in detail as possible, or and a good way of doing it, I find, is allowing the children or the players to come up with the phrase, or listen to what they're saying. Yeah. Like as a coach, I remember one time coaching with some really young children, you say, oh, when you dribble, you should look up. And then there's one kid's going like that. And he's like looking straight up at the sky, and then the ball's nowhere near him. And I have a chat with him, and he says, well, you told me to look up. And I'm like, yeah, well, just check that you're not going to crash. And he says, oh, you mean look around? And I was like, yeah, I do. I actually do mean look around. You're right. What was I thinking? Why am I telling him to look up? Look up. He did exactly what I said. So just thinking about, and when I plan sessions now, and I try and stress this more and more to the coaches that I worked with when I do work with, when I'm mentoring, is it's not so much the session, it's around the delivery and bringing it to life. And I try and plan the wording I would use to describe things. So if I want my team to penetrate, or if you want them to be direct, or it'll just be hit the number 9 as often as possible, or something like that. So it's so now what I want you to do in this game is hit the number 9 as often as possible. Okay, right, yeah. That's quite straightforward. And then I might reflect and go, is there a simpler way of saying that same message? Rather than every time you get the ball, look up, and if the number 9's on, I want you to pass to him. No, it's when you get it, hit the number 9 as much as possible. And then I'll reflect, okay, can I say that same thing in less words or in a better way? And just encouraging myself to give time to the words and the delivery, rather than just a structure of a game. And it's really hard in the moment, because I'm thinking I've actually just waffled for a long time, and I'm talking about trying to be concise, which is quite contradictory.
No, and one of the points there is that you mentioned obviously reflecting on what you're saying, obviously planning. We're both fortunate enough that we can probably spend a little bit more time planning. One of the things I've taken away from the mental scheme is the power of that. And can you spend an equal amount of time doing each? So if your session's an hour, can you spend an hour planning? And I understand that the majority of grassroots coaches, or sometimes, academy coaches, don't have that time. And it's usually in the car on the way to training, reflective on the game. But I think the power comes from the reviewing. Really have that clarity of saying what went well, even better if, and what would you do next time? What would you sort of add to that?
Yeah, it's massively important. I think a lot of coaches do it naturally anyway. but maybe don't. I know you're excellent at it, committing it to paper or making steps ahead. And I'm terrible for it, and I have to hold my hands up. I do a lot of reflecting, like most coaches, in my drive home from work. So I've got just over an hour commute from work to home. When I finish a coaching session, that'll be where I'll be on the phone, usually to my wife, and I'm telling her how bad my session was or how I'm really happy. And I'm like, I was really good tonight. She doesn't care. She doesn't know what I'm on about. No, she does care. I shouldn't say that, but she doesn't know if my interventions were concise enough. But I'm going to tell her, and I'm going to talk, and that's my reflecting. And I'd encourage people, find people that you can just bounce things off, even if you don't have the time or ability or willingness to write it down. Just thinking it is better than nothing. I think with the plan do review process is massive. I like what you said around giving equal time to the plan and the review. I think rather than just time, I think that the focus is important. So with the planning, I think a lot of, and I'm guilty of it too, a lot of focus goes on to what I'm going to deliver. So what does the session look like, or what practice shall I use, or some people might be guilty of flicking through social media to find a practice. The planning should be around, okay, how is that practice going to be altered, tweaked, or how am I going to set it up to impact the players? What do the players need, and what do I hope they get from it? So it's, like I said, it's how am I structure my description of that practice? How am I making sure there's things like less cones, or how can I flow from A to B better so that the players get more ball rolling time? It's not so much what A is and what B is. And maybe I'm being blasé about it because I've been coaching for a while, that I think I'm quite good at session design, but it's the other bits now. It's what words do I say here and here? What are my teams like? Who's going up against who? How can I change the practice slightly for him so that he's getting work on what he needs? So we've got a boy who's injured, long-term injury at the minute. Rather than me serve the ball in, he's going to start the practice with a throw-in every time. So he's still engaged socially. And then I'm going to challenge him. Well, how can one of my players in the middle, I want him to work on smoothing out. So I've said to him, like, sometimes take a throw-in, but sometimes just bounce it as hard as you can at someone's shin. And like, okay, little tiny tweaks so that the individual player is going to get the most out of that session, rather than just what the session is. And I think that's vital. But then ultimately, like you said, then review against that. So not just was my rondo good, but did Martin get enough out of that session? Did I challenge him enough? Could I have changed? How can I get more from that session for Martin next time? Rather than just today was good or today was bad. So what am I actually reviewing against? And I say, even if you do it, I do believe the process of doing it is important. Like I say, even if it's just a conversation with someone. I mean, you're probably the same as me. You get to 9:30 at night and you're still stood in the car park chatting about sessions, and you think, I need to get home at some point. But that's reviewing. That's it. That's getting it off your chest.
It's usually me leading the conversation, if I'm honest, and another person's going, shut up, Martin, come on. But I think it's a great point, and it's something that's just certainly sparked in my head, is that when we do have those conversations, we've all got smartphones at the minute. Why can't we record the conversations and, maybe come back to it? Because some of the most important learning I've had is where, again, I've come home and vented at the wife, and I'm fortunate that the wife used to play at a good standard. And I will put it out there that she was a lot better than me. So she understands what I'm on about and bounces good ideas off me. And I think certainly she's been a good mentor for me, really, to bounce those ideas off. And look, some of the stuff we've picked up from the conversation, I'm sure if there wasn't a time limit, we could talk for hours about this and around interventions and questions. But I'm sure we'll get another time together when we can do that. I just want to sort of come around and say, what would you say the main differences are between coaching and mentoring?
It's a difficult one. I think, like I said, it's still developing people, but I guess mentoring, you're usually working with older people who probably have more answers than, now I might be wrong here, but maybe they have more answers than players. So maybe mentoring, I'd say, is just helping them like join the dots.
Yeah.
Now I know that's the same for coaching, but if you're working in the young ages, there's an element of education in the early years of coaching, because the kids or the players might not have that information already stored.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an element of teaching. You also want the kids to be able to execute and deal under quicker. I think when you're working with coaches, there's a bit more time to be analytical and think about things before you do it. I think it's all about habits, good habits, and just it's about supporting them. Again, there's not many differences, if I'm honest. It's just the language you'd use. Like you can probably, when you're mentoring, you can probably talk football jargon a little bit more than when you're working with young children.
Yeah,
I mean, that's now changing because of FIFA and stuff like that, and we have to learn off the kids. But I think both of them involve getting other people to execute rather than you doing it yourself. Yeah. So whether that's you working as a coach to a player or mentoring a coach, it's not you delivering the outcome. You've got to try and get or help the others to do it.
I think you alluded to it during that sort of feedback there. But you and I are both a sucker for a quote, and one of the quotes I've come across recently is that a coach has some great answers. Sorry, a coach has some great questions for your answers, whereas a mentor has some great answers for your questions. Would you say that sums it up pretty well?
Yeah, I like that. I do like that. I also think though, I think we can learn so much from both. So, I'm fortunate now in my full-time role to coach players, even at 12, 13, 14, who are far better than I ever was or could be. So they can teach me a thing or two on the pitch. My job then is to just make them question or double check why they're doing it and understanding that. But I learn so much from them. And the same even with, like we spoke about earlier, in mentoring, we can definitely learn so much. Sometimes mentoring is just holding the mirror up, isn't it? Mm. But I like that summary, but I'd also challenge it a little bit and say you both can learn from player or coach. I definitely think that.
Yeah. I mean, what would just sort of bring it down into an easy path out, because it's just for the listeners, it's getting late at night and I'm pretty sure so the end of lockdown. But for any coaches either starting their journey or in the process of developing themselves, whether it be a parent or a young boy or girl looking to get into coaching, what advice, what keywords would you give to them?
I'd say just go and get the hours under your belt. So that might be, and that might not be, if you're very early into it, it might not be doing hours. It might just be watching hours. So if you've never coached before, I'm not expecting you to go out and just start leading sessions. But it's get out there and start to build your hours. So that'll be watching other coaches, whether that's online, there's so much resources out there now, or if you are fortunate, ask people, kind of come and watch. A lot of people are more open than you think. Speak to people. Social media is massive for that. I'll never forget. I got Twitter how many years ago and messaged a lad on there called Johnny Henderson. Never met Johnny before. Johnny was academy manager at Bristol Rovers, and Johnny was putting some great content out there. I'd only just joined it, and I messaged him a question. I'd just gone in as YDP lead at Northampton, never done a role like that. Had some questions around syllabuses. I'd never met Johnny before. We were just people on Twitter. Johnny went out of his way to help me and share stuff, and I thought, even to this day, I owe Johnny so much for that. And we're good friends now, and I've been fortunate to meet Johnny on several occasions, and we're good friends. But just there's people out there who who are willing to share and help, and so take advantage of it. There's no excuse. There's loads of free resources, but then just go out and start like I did, volunteering, building your craft. You have to craft, work at your craft, just like being a player, just like being an expert in anything. You gotta put the time in, and don't be afraid to get it wrong, because as long as your intentions are good, no one's gonna criticize. But yeah, just keep, and then be prepared that it's going to take time. So it's going to be hard. It's not, but everything that's a challenge is worthwhile, isn't it? And it'll come right in the end. So yeah, definitely just go out there, watch, do, experiment, get it wrong, reflect, like you said, and then keep doing it again. Don't be too quick to chase things either. It's not about badges or qualifications. Don't chase that too soon, because we were speaking off air about being able to deliver. You need to be good at your craft to get a career at the highest level. So, and that's not just X's and O's or session design. That's communication. It's reflection. It's all the other stuff. So yeah, just build up that bank of work and practice, I guess.
That's been massive for me that you mentioned about don't chase that badge. And again, there's two guys that have played a massive part in my career today. Matt Jones, who works over at Shropshire FA, and a guy called Martin Ho from Liverpool. I went on the Mod 3, having done Mod 1, 2 and 3 within about 12 months, and realised that I was nowhere near the level of these two guys. So I think I took around 18 months out to just go and master and consolidate all that learning. And it's helped me so much moving forward. So rather than skim the surface, really go and, as you said, master your craft.
Yeah.
Your way forward. I think that's been brilliant. What does the future hold for you now then, Lee? Obviously, you're back on the grass, back coaching. What do you see in 5 years' time?
Yeah, I've always had the goal or the ambition to work with sort of the professional development phase on a daily basis and really challenge myself at 18s or 23s age group on a daily basis. I think I've been fortunate to work 12 to 16s for quite a few years, had experience of doing some bits in the foundation, but that's an area that I've not yet really sunk my teeth into. I've been fortunate at Northampton to be around it for a fair, and even at West Brom, getting some great experience in there. But again, that longer journey of working over a season, just challenge myself with older players, and then at least I might know, do you know what, I'm better at 12 to 16. So it's an area that I'm unsure of about my capability yet. But I'm definitely keen to give that a go. But at the same time, I'm in no rush, and the head of coaching and the coach development stuff is still of interest to me. So I see myself having two distinct paths. I'm not at a crossroads, but I'd be happy with either way. It just depends on what opportunities come up. But I definitely want to right now keep working with players and challenging myself to help make the best players even better. So yeah, I'm fortunate with my current role. Yeah.
I'm very sure, not just obviously from myself, but other listeners, that no matter where you go or what path you go down, you'll be very successful with that, Lee. And again, before getting to our quick fire question round, I want to place on record what a big inspiration you've been for, not only for this podcast, but myself in a coaching and mentoring role. There's been many a time where I've picked up the phone or dropped you a text because I've been frustrated, or I have a little bit of an event, and you've certainly shaped the way that I am. So anybody who's listening, please go and have a listen to the Coaches Coffee Club, and the words of wisdom that come from Lee and his guests.
You're too kind, mate. You're too kind. But no, mate. Listen, we maybe it's fate that we end up sitting next to each other that time in Halifax town, but I'm sure we'd have crossed paths, because I say what you're doing and the values that we share and the work we do, I think, is similar. So this has been it's always good to chat to you, mate, isn't it? So
it's certainly an honour to have you on, mate. And I say hopefully we can get some good value from it. And this is a little bit of a chance to come away from the sort of serious stuff. And there's I just want to put you on the spot and make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So, what do you prefer, Lee? Developing coaches or developing players?
I said it sounds like I'm trying to swerve it, but I really enjoy developing people. But I miss developing players, which is why right now that's where I'm at. I do prefer at the moment developing players.
Very safe answer there. Biggest role model?
Oh, it's a tough one. I've had many, to be fair. I think in hindsight, so many people have played different parts. I wouldn't say there's one person who I aspire to be like. I think there's been so many, so I'm really fortunate that, like I said, early days, Russell Lewis got me into coaching and gave me a break, to be fair. And then Trevor Gould has given me, just let me do things and shared his wisdom. And I was fortunate to meet people like Ryan May, Matty Joseph through the FA work, and then when Ryan was at West Brom. So I'm fortunate to have had quite a few people who are, and still now, the staff that have been and were at West Brom are taking me out of my comfort zone and challenging me on a daily basis. So I'm really fortunate in that sense that I've been around a lot of people that I could class as role models or people I look up to. There's so many more that you can say.
So we'll send a quick apology to those that you forgot to mention. But
yeah, it'll take too long.
This might be another tough one. But who's your best friend in football?
Oh, I meet so many, mate. Like you said, without football, we wouldn't have met. So I've been fortunate in that. So I'd say Carl Craner's my best friend. He will claim that he works in football, but I'd say no. He's loosely involved. But yeah, Carl, people like from my very early days at Northampton, Lee Hayes, Steve Healy, Matty Craddock. There's so many. I'm quite fortunate that there's so many like-minded people in football that it's easy to get along with so many people. So
it's another safe answer from yourself there. Who's the best player you've coached?
I say I'm seeing a different type of player now at West Brom. The younger players, the level that they're at is ridiculous to what I've ever known. But at Northampton, a lad called Ivan Toney. He's now top scorer in the league, in League One at the present. I think he plays for Peterborough. Ivan was, when I was volunteering at the under-16s at Northampton, Ivan was there and then went into 18s and first team. And he was just, still is. You look on YouTube, the goals he scored this season, I don't even know how the boy spots these things, let alone pulls them off. And he used to be like that, just fearless, confident in his ability, and he's showing it now even at the top level. So someone like Ivan was just eye-catching, and there's no wonder he's gone on to do what he's done. So I'd say someone like Ivan. Again, been so many for different reasons, but he's one that stands out, I think.
In all the years through coaching, who's been your toughest opponent?
When Mark Lyons and I worked with the 18s for a spell, we'd always struggle. We'd have great games against Peterborough, which was Ryan Semple and Jack Collison, and they'd set their teams up, and being a local derby as well, Northampton against Peterborough under 18s, we'd have some great games. And sometimes we'd come out on top, sometimes we wouldn't. But Jack and Ryan were always great guys, but when it came to playing their teams, it was always a challenge.
Is there anyone you would recommend or like to hear on the podcast? Anyone we could get in?
Yeah, I've been fortunate to have a couple of people on mine. So Aaron Danks was a really, really good conversation. He's working at the youth national teams. Damien Hughes, he's a sort of culture psychologist, environmental and cultural psychologist. So it was fascinating to listen to Damien speak. Like just before this, we were on a webinar with Martin Diggle and could have listened to that all night. Ben Bartlett, I was fortunate to do the Advanced Youth Award with Ben when he's now at Fulham, but I really like the way Ben speaks. But then, like I say, any people like Matt Craddock, Ryan May, these kind of guys have just got stories that they can share and opinions that they've got, which, like we have, mate, we can speak for hours to people like that. So,
yeah, I think Zoom are going to probably kick me off at some point. We always tend to go off on a scale, and that's something I need to do better in terms of my time management on these podcasts. But again, as I mentioned, I could talk for days with you, Lee. I always take so much value from the conversations that we have, mate. And I just want to say thank you for taking up your time. It's 8:30 at night, and sorry, on 10:30 at night.
Yeah, we started at 8:30, I think.
No, I'm losing track of time, but it's been great. And again, the support you've shown to me, not only as a coach and a mentor, but a friend as well, has been brilliant, mate. And look, want you and your family to stay safe, and just basically keep well, keep smiling, and no doubt we'll have another chat at some point.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Thank you for having me on. Again, I do the same for you, mate. I'm glad we met. I really enjoy catching up, and everything you're doing with PCT work and especially the podcast is great. So keep it up, mate.
Learn from the best, mate. No, I appreciate it. I'll let you get off, because no doubt I've got my wife scowling at me on the settee now, and my wife's going to be shouting.
She's going to do some mentoring now. You spoke for too long.
Build a bit of rapport. We'll try and lockdown's helping. But no, brilliantly. It's great to catch up, mate.
Great stuff.
Speak soon. Cheers,
mate. All the best. Keep safe.
Bye now.
As well as the great work Lee does with the Coaches Coffee Club podcast, he has teamed up with Matty Craddock, Head of Coaching at Preston North End, to bring you Minerva Coach Development, where they provide a collection of resources and thoughts to support coaches who would like to develop. Check out their work at www.minervacoachdevelopment.co.uk. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoy the content that we're trying to bring to you. Don't forget, new episodes will be released every Monday. You can find us on the iTunes Store, Spotify, and if you want to see the video, you can see it on our YouTube channel, PCT Football Coaching.